The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast gems.
Like, why do people really want their entertainment spoon-fed to them? Not everyone, but like, why is that something that's in the general
obviously
public?
a lot of people do. I mean, if you look at a lot of the movies that are streaming, and I'm not talking about Acorn or BritBox or any of those, but the other more general films that are out there that are American. I mean, you could almost diagram them almost the same way, each one of those stories. I mean, they're so predictable.
Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Andrew Rimby, aka Andrew. Thank you so much for listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room podcast. And before you hear today's episode, which I just know you're going to love, can you please do me a favor? And wherever you're listening, if it's Spotify or Apple, please rate and review us. Make sure you're following the podcast. Share it with friends, family, anyone you think would just love hearing this conversation. And you can watch our podcast on YouTube. Yes, we have a YouTube channel. It's called the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and you'll see the video episode. So please make sure you like the video you're watching and comment. I always respond to the comments. Also, we have a Patreon. So if you don't want any of the ads and you want bonus material, join our Patreon. There's a 1-week free trial. It's patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And the free trial is for the professor level. Without further ado, here is today's exciting episode. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to a summer episode of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. It's nice and glowy here in North Jersey, and my guest is also from Jersey, so lovely to always have a Jersey writer. No offense to those not from Jersey, but we share a bond. So I'm so happy to have Laury A. Egan back on the podcast. We had such a wonderful time talking about her novel writing. So if you never listened to that episode, please do. She is the author of 14 books of fiction. I think it just keeps growing. So today we're going to talk about her new book, which is a collection of short stories called Contrary, Stories and a Play. There's 21 stories and a 2-act play, and it spans all the way from America, Britain, Greece, characters that are straight, gay, rich, poor, young, old, lots of binaries there. I like it. So, Laurie, welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room.
Well, I'm so glad to come.
So, we were having a great conversation off air before I hit the record button about why do people, when they hear short stories, the public, right? They're not in a university classroom. Maybe they're not deep into literature the way both of us are. What is it about short stories that just makes the general public pause, in your opinion?
I have no idea, but I catch myself feeling a little like that too when I'm asked to review a book of short stories. Um, I don't know what it is. Maybe people want to just really get into something and stay in a story for a long time, like, more than a few minutes. I have no idea, but the whole idea of a short story is very different than a novel, not only for the reader, but also for the writer. It really requires creating an arc and a hook like it does for a novel. However, the arc has got to be relatively simple and it has to feel like it's done at the end. Whereas, it's easier to do that in a novel because you've got this, really long period of time that the plot takes place. So I don't know why people balk at short stories because I think they're a lot of fun, sort of like eating popcorn.
Yeah, and there's such masterful novelists who write short stories. I mean, you can't be aware of Virginia Woolf or Joyce Carol Oates, Stephen King, William Faulkner. I just taught A Rose for Emily for the first time with my students. That story, I mean, is just so full of gothic symbolism. I feel short stories have, like you said, you have to pack a punch in one sitting, right? Like a short story, in my opinion, is something that you can sit down or you can listen to and it'll be done in an hour. Um, and it's something that you can read aloud and it doesn't take too much time. And I think that short stories have such that campfire uh, allure of being dazzled by the storyteller. Like it has such an ancient root, in my opinion, and maybe that's why I find it so fascinating. But like for you, what was it like growing up? Like, do you remember any specific authors who wrote short stories that just captivated your mind?
Not while I was, I'm just trying to think. I don't think while I was growing up I read many short stories, except for, school kinds of things where they assign them. And right now I'm reading Laury Aslan's new book, Are You Happy, which is a collection of 9 stories. She is a master short story writer and has been a judge, won awards, and she and her wife, who's also a writer, they're really a great duo, but I'm really enjoying these. These are a little longer stories than mine. Mine are sort of more, some of them are very short. There's, I think, one that's considered flash fiction, maybe two, I can't remember now, but that's a new subcategory that has become very popular. So, the whole theory is if you don't like reading short stories, if maybe you'll read flash fiction, which is usually considered under 1,000 words. And
Wow,
so
under
that
a
doesn't make any
thousand.
sense, but that's very popular right now. A lot of people are, particularly online.
Well, and it's kind of when you go to a bookstore and they have that section of poetry, it reminds me of how many in the general public are going to their library or bookstore and going to the poetry section. I mean, again, I feel like it's a very curated group
Mhm.
already that, have you dabbled in poetry too? Or is that a genre that you don't necessarily get involved in?
Well, I've written 4 volumes of poetry, and
Oh,
in fact,
wow.
I just donated my 75 or 80 books, poetry books, to my local library. Um, and I used to read a lot of poetry, particularly I was a subscriber to American Poetry Review, and so a lot of that stuff I didn't really enjoy very much, I have to say. But when I hit somebody that I hadn't heard of before, and I really liked the selection that they had done, I usually bought a book because I know how important it is to buy a book,
Yes,
particularly for
yes.
poets and short story writers. This is really, you don't make as much money on these as you would a novel, for example.
Well, one of my favorite like young poets right now is Amanda Gorman. Do you
Yes,
Yes, like her powerful poem that she did during I think it was Biden's inauguration.
yes.
Um The Hill We Climb, I think is what it's called. But it was so powerful. But yeah, I mean, I think the reason this is so interesting though, Lori, is how has it been talking to authors? Because preparing for my conversation with you, it is really fascinating that so many novelists that are assigned also have large collections of short stories. Like growing up in school, I feel like I was assigned more short stories in middle
Yes.
school, definitely, than novels. And like Edgar Allan Poe. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't read short stories without reading Edgar Allan Poe. and understanding the setting, the symbolism. Like, I think figurative language is so powerful in short stories because, like you said, you have to really quickly get to the climax and
Yeah, I think
the
so. And I
characters.
think you really have to get rid of anything that is too involved. You've got to sort of keep it simple, but yet you've got to give enough backstory to the characters. You've got to flesh them out, how everything looks. You have to do all of the things that you do in a novel, but in a more condensed form. And you can't lose the tension. That's the other thing. Whereas a novel, there's a sort of ebb and flow. There are some quiet moments, but in a short story, you've really got to make everything work, and be of interest. For example, your dialogue's got to work really well to convey information to the reader. Dialogue is extremely important. Whereas let's say setting might be more important in a novel than it might be
Yes.
in a short story. Not necessarily, but I think dialogue's really an important driver for holding a reader's attention. And, it's usually like a what if kind of plot. What
Hmm.
if this happened? And then you go from there. And I think that that's both true for novels, but it's also really important for a short story.
Yeah. What if an antiquated town holds a lottery on a beautiful sunny day and they have to elect someone to sacrifice in Shirley Jackson's short story? Like, that is a story to
Yeah.
me that is so, like, no matter when I read it, it always surprises you. Even though I know what's coming, I'm like, I know that she's going to be sacrificed, but it comes out of left field because of, I think, the scarcity of um the scarcity of just how she has to drive forward with the dialogue. Like, the
Hmm.
dialogue is what's key. And you're right. I think that it's so different than when you read The Haunting of Hill House. Like, thinking about, like, even your work, Laurie, how do you hold all of these characters in your head? Like, it's so fascinating of when you're crafting a short story, like your new collection, Contrary, how do you craft that differently than, say, your new novel, Fair Haven? Like, what's the process like?
Well, unlike my first collection, Fog and Other Stories, which had a very loose theme of fog of dementia, illness, all kinds of different kinds of fog dreams. Um, this one doesn't really have a strong story to story connection, although a couple of people have commented that there's a sense of otherness to the stories, and of course contrariness, which I fully confess I'm a bit of a contrarian, so nobody was really surprised when I came up with this title. But I so these stories may have a sort of connection to each other that I don't always see, but they were written very independently of each other without the idea of a collection. I was mostly just writing them to submit to literary journals, which most of them have been published in. Um, so when I put together this group, I had a couple of people who helped me out trying to put the order in because that was very difficult. But I think that there is probably stylistically some similarities between them because obviously I'm the same the same writer for each one. But I didn't really set out to do a collection per se as I did on the first one that I
Mm.
did. But I think it works, and I think it really shows the diversity of the kinds of things I write. And one of the things that's sort of odd about me is that I write in different genres and for different markets. So as a result, I might write psychological suspense or comedy or romance, or not too much romance, but a little bit, or literary
Yeah.
work. And as a result, I don't have a really narrow readership. I get a really sort of wide ranging uh, group of people that will read my work. And I think Contrary really shows the diversity of my vision, and I tend to write the story that needed to be written. That's the way it comes to me. I guess that
Yes,
sounds
yes,
stupid,
yes.
but
No,
that's
and
the way I feel about it.
like, what were some of the driving questions when you set out to write these short stories in Contrary, that you were really excited about, these what if questions?
Well, there are some that have some autobiographical touches to them. I did two about my father, contagious dementia, where he was in about to have a CT scan, and he was down in the bowels of the hospital and was confused. And then also the impaired pair, which was also about my father and my mother. So I threw a couple of those in. It's still creative fiction, but I did use a little of those because I wanted to explore the idea of dementia being both really sad, but also sort of funny sometimes. And, so there's a little bit of an element of humor. And the opening story, Contrary, was something that's sort of been in my head for years because my mother was a very elegant, very beautiful woman. Um, she always wanted me to get dressed up for all these social occasions, and I had sort of feet that didn't go into then pointed shoes. It just didn't fit. And so this mother-daughter conflict that I experienced was really typical. So I wanted to sort of give a little dig at my mother, who is no longer with us for many years now. But I wanted to show how being a child and having a really imposing, impressive parent can be very difficult. There are a number of children in this book, and I think what you begin to see, if there's a little sub theme, is that what is done to a child has an impact later in life or even during the childhood period. And so in a sense, they're sort of like young adults. I think we don't give kids enough credit for being pretty wise and smart. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree. And do you feel like a lot of your the thread of the short stories, or do they follow, like, because you've talked about how much you span genres, would you say that there is a psychological angle? Is there more realism, like hyper-realism, historical, um, fictional elements, or do they kind of go back and forth between genres? Now that the fall season is here, you may be wondering, okay, I had all of these beach reads, Andrew, but now I don't know what books to read for the fall. Well, guess what? My friends at the Gay and Lesbian Review magazine have you covered. Their new September and October issue, called Forgotten Histories, features wonderful book recommendations, TV shows, and films that help excavate LGBTQ history. So, whether you're interested in learning more about the connection between shopping and the gay community, which, I have a Home Goods and Marshalls addiction, as my fiance knows, they got you covered there. They have an article about the attraction of Confederate gentlemen by the incredible writer Andrew Holleran. There's an article about the French evolution of sexual identities and even the first LGBT riot, which happened in 1953. Go over to glreview.org. You can get either a digital subscription or a print subscription. I love my print subscription, which I'm holding up right here. And with the exclusive code ITBR Choice, you will get a free issue with your subscription. So ITBR Choice, put that in the promo code section and get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review print or digital subscription. I know you're going to love their magazine.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samara Origins by The Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samara Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samara. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samara Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
They sort of go back and forth because I was always very interested in psychology, and a lot of my books are in the psychological suspense area. One of my earliest influences was Patricia Highsmith, who I sort of don't think I would like to meet because I think she was really difficult and probably drinking way too much. But I got onto the psychological aspects. That's something that's very comfortable for me. So a lot of my work's very character driven, and the stories are very much so. I mean, Fairhaven, you have quite a few characters in there, but I think they're all immediately recognizable as individuals. So I really tend to look at the backstory of people, how they came to be as an adult or how they were shaping up as a child. I think that those are very important aspects of this book, this collection.
Yeah. So I have two reading experiences. I'm not sure if you're similar, but I have the analytic reading. Like if I know that there's something I'm either like this, preparing for an interview, teaching, something that's going to go into research, or I have the like feet up, kicked back on the beach, soaking up the sun, listening to the waves and just reading without my pen or pencil in hand. Like, do you have those types of reading experiences?
Yeah. Up until last Friday, I had been a reviewer for the New York Journal of Books, which just suddenly closed its doors. And I found that fascinating because it gave me an opportunity to read, as you say, with a pencil in hand, and to look at the bare bones of what these different writers have done. And both, and it was astonishing that some of the really popular multi-million sales authors really had severe problems with her writing. I mean, I made mistakes and and I was quick to point them out. I didn't let anybody get off. I mean, like Patricia Cornwell, her last book, she just kept cobbling together two independent clauses with a conjunction, but the two clauses didn't go to each other. So it should have been two sentences. She did this over and over and over again. And I was like, why didn't an editor, this is her, 21st book or something? Why doesn't somebody stop her from doing this? It's very annoying. But that's the kind of thing. You can't just assume because somebody has sold millions of books that they're a good writer. And the thriller genre, at least in this country, because thrillers are different in Britain, for example. But the thriller writer really doesn't pay as much attention to the writing itself. It's more plot, action, movement, and that kind of stuff. So I tended to sort of, in these stories, really focus on a kernel of something that's happened or a character, and really trying to play with that.
Yeah. Well, first, wait, the New York Review of Books shut
New
its
York,
doors?
New York Journal of Books.
Oh, still, I
Did
mean,
I say review? Yeah.
No. I don't think you did. I think I heard that in my head, but
Yeah, well,
that's
it's not the review, it's the Journal of, and it was really fun. I mean, because
yeah.
I got to pick the books I wanted to read, and then the publisher would send them to me. So I had a lot of fun with that. I learned a lot too.
Yeah. But I think that in this current moment where arts in like humanities thinking is so under attack, I mean, the attack of the humanities has been going on for a while. But like I think it's so fascinating what you said, Laurie, and I don't want to let it go because I think it's so important that there are so many best-selling writers out there on the shelves who have so many writing issues if you actually see their manuscripts. And I always say that to my students or the public is you're seeing their final copy go through so many hands. Like the final copy of a Stephen King novel wasn't just what Stephen King wrote. Like, again, but you're also saying that there's some authors who get platformed. Maybe not Stephen King, we'll leave him.
Yeah.
he's earned his due. But there are those who like have a one-hit wonder and it gets turned into a movie. And sometimes you actually read the book and think, "Oh, there's really not that much meat here." But it was an interesting question that they explored. It was an interesting premise.
Yeah.
And yeah. Do
There's
you
a lot of
think that
activity. That's what Americans now, if you look at our films, for example, which are, mirror a lot of the literary work that's coming out of this country, it's all fast action, violence, and movement, and very short on character, very short on depth, themes, anything that has any, as you say, meat to it. And I'm at the point now where I can't hardly watch an American film anymore, except for a few, because it's the same regurgitation. It's like shock element is constantly going on. And I think our books are also, a lot of the thrillers are like that. And that's pretty much, with a few exceptions, that's pretty much what American literary scene is all about right now. That's where people buy their books. They go to the Michael Connellys, the Cornwalls, and people like that. And if they tell a good story, you're entertained. And talk about lying on a beach. These are people that you would lie on a beach and just kick back and enjoy the ride. But there's nothing really much there.
yes,
you
but like
know?
beach reads have now dominated
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
culture of literature in America, which
I think so.
it's like pop culture writing has now become the entree. And not saying that that's an issue, because you can have amazing pop culture analyses, or I really like essays, memoirs, like where there's reflections on different topics. But like there's a book that I really thought about. I was thinking Laurie would love this. It's Elaine Castillo, How We Read, or I have it somewhere, but it's I'll have to look it up. But it's something about reflecting
Okay.
on like how do we read right now in our culture. And it's like her taking you through different case studies.
Mhm.
How to Read Now, that's what it's called. So like I'm really interested in that, but you're right. There's we've the American attention span, I feel, doesn't really want to pick up a Mrs. Dalloway. It does not want to pick up even a Joyce Carol Oates Blonde, or like it doesn't really want the Patricia Highsmith Carol or The Price of Salt. Like we have lost, if it's not all given to you right at the beginning, it's I think maybe it's that social media culture. I think that has really the impact of you getting everything digestible right away has affected attention spans when it comes to the art of reading.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So therefore, oddly enough, you'd think short stories, particularly shorter stories, which mostly these stories in contrary are, you think that that would be very appealing. But, as we were saying, short stories are a harder sell than a novel, for example. So I don't get it really, frankly, but and like Laurie Osland, who I'm reading right now, Are You Happy? She's a great writer, and but her stories are longer. I mean, these are pretty short stories, so you can read one in a very quick amount of time. There are a couple of longer ones that are maybe about 6,000 words or so, but I don't understand why the short story collection is still climbing out of its old reputation. I don't understand it at all. Because I would tend to think people would really go for these. And obviously, a lot of people are getting online stories from journals, and most of those are 3 to 5,000 words or
Yeah.
less. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, something that I find just so interesting when I talk with you is it's beautiful to hear from, you know, an invested writer or someone who actually just loves the art of literature itself. Like you love, you know, looking at the journals, seeing what's been published. Like you're there editing, like you're at the forefront of what's going on in culture. And I think that you take time to pause and reflect on your reading process. And I
Yeah.
think that right now there's almost a peer pressure of like, what did you read? How much did you read? And it's like sometimes it's okay to just pause, not tell everyone what you're doing. You don't have to like shout it out on social media of like a competition of reading and just enjoy the process. Like sometimes I say, to study the humanities is to just enrich yourself in the arts. And there doesn't have to be the question of what's that going to do for my career? Like the enrichment of the arts is a passion. Like the passion is the career. You know, not the career, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
It is the
Well,
art of what you're studying.
yeah, I don't know the actual statistics, but most writers make almost no money, and
Mhm.
myself included. You have to do it because this is what you have to do. I mean, like, there's just no question in my mind that this is something I have to do. So, ergo, I do it. But I don't think about it in terms of career or money or anything. In fact, often I just sort of something nice happens, like I got a New Jersey Council of the Arts individual award for fiction last year. Well, that was really nice. I really liked that. But then I forgot about it. I went on to the next thing that I was working on. And, once a book is published, in many ways, it's gone to me. It's
Mm.
like, I'm on to the next thing. And I think I'm not so ego invested in my work that I sit and bask at good reviews. Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to have them and they're helpful, but I think it's the process of writing that really matters to me. And editing, I really actually, it takes a lot of patience. I do like editing and I do a lot of it. In fact, my publisher, Andrew May at Spectrum Books, was very amused because I've got a revised edition of my first book, Jenny Kidd, which is set in Venice. Psychological suspense, very much in the Highsmith mode. But his father, who was the editor, couldn't find hardly any mistakes in the manuscript. And so Carl was very upset. And I kept thinking it was him, not me. So he read the thing over again and over again, and he came up with 11 errors out of 250 pages. And several of those were duplicates, like
Mm.
misspelling mustache like a British person versus American spelling. So I had to laugh. I mean, but I think editing is a very important part of the whole process. And people don't do enough of it. They just dash something off and think, oh, I'm finished, good, and send it. And it shows. I often do 25 to 40 passes on a novel, for example.
Wow,
And
25
I'm
passes of
unusual.
reading over your
Yeah.
novel for
Not
editing
to say that
mistakes.
there are no mistakes, because there always are, but,
No, but
I
that's still
really do my
impressive.
best. Yeah.
And well, that's the thing. Is it we have like how have you navigated or have you had any conversations about AI or just like what's going on right now with people using like I talk about that with my students. Like we'll even look at AI and just see what it's generating. And then it really is such a business way of writing and it doesn't have that depth. But why is it such a concern right now, do you think?
Well, I think people, well, I would never use it. I don't know a lot about it, I have to confess. But I find it very off-putting that it's become so popular. I think it's just one more indication that our society wants everything easy and spoon-fed, and they don't want to put in the time or the work. And I think that's one of the reasons of the American downfall in general is that we don't want to put in the work. we don't want, and what it does is, I think, is just cuts down on the creative feeling and the pleasure that you get from writing something new. Um, I mean, who could get excited about an AI generated manuscript that they turned into a publisher? I don't know. I find it very off-putting, the whole idea of it, and I can see in some cases where it's useful, like in the commercial aspects of for creating backgrounds and doing all kinds of things, but not me. Thank you.
Yeah, like I've found that it's interesting when you use it for, like, say, outlining a recipe, or maybe like, how am I going to put together this um like brainstorming ideas, like giving you some ideas to go with. But to actually write a creative work, it doesn't have your, like, you still have the driving force of what you know is in your mind and you want to put it out on the page. Like, AI isn't doing that for you. Like, it is not Laury A. Egan's mind.
Yeah,
And but I think it's, yeah, can you speak a little more about, I think it's fascinating what you say about the American downfall, like things being easy. Maybe that is exactly what um we're currently navigating as a literary culture, is like, why do people really want their entertainment spoon fed to them? Not everyone, but like, why is that
well,
something that's in the general
obviously a
public?
lot of people do. I mean, if you look at um a lot of the movies that are streaming, and I'm not talking about Acorn or BritBox or any of those, but the other more general films that are out there that are American. I mean, you could almost diagram them almost the same way, each one of those stories. I mean, they're so predictable, but that's comfortable for a lot of people. They want to just get what they already like. They want more of the same thing, and that's what film producers are looking for, things that fit that mold. And I just don't think people want to work at anything anymore. And I don't mean like work, but they don't want to have to really think about anything, and they don't want to get really too involved. They want to sort of sit back and do the beach read, or it's just the film they can sit and not think about, and then they can
Mm.
forget about it the next morning. They don't have to think about it anymore. I think we've really moved into this, and this is a social media issue. Everything is out there, but I think this is really a problem for creative people and people who are trying to do more serious work, literary work, or even really good genre work, because um, you know it's more complicated. Even a little short story that's only a couple of pages long, maybe like 3 or 4 pages, there's a lot packed in there, and the reader has to think about afterwards. Well, gee, what was that about? And go through it. And most people don't want to do that anymore. I think that's really what's going on. I mean, our language, everything. I mean, I'm so tired of listening to sports announcers messing up grammar, and everybody is just going for the lowest common denominator of language and usage and everything, and I find it very distressing.
Yes. And I've even had conversations with others in the podcast space, and they say, like, what you do, Andrew, is more highbrow thinking, or you have more deep conversations with your guests than doing like quick sound bites or gossipy gotcha questions. And I said, well, that's not the point. The point is to deep dive with my guests, their process, like whether that's they're a writer, they're an entertainer, like whatever it is that drives you. And I think that there's something to actually just hearing about our process of being creators. Like, we need those conversations. Like, we can't just have everything uh not even spoon fed, but quick sound bites. Like, it's kind of, that's the issue, is if that's what everyone wants to hear is quick sound bites, what does that mean about our level of thinking and intellectual rigor? I
It's
don't know.
absent.
It concerns me. Now that the college semester has begun, you know that there are so many books that I can't wait to recommend to you all. Well, my favorite independent publisher, Broadview Press, has some incredible books that have just come out. One of them I'm actually using in my writing course. It's called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college by Rachel Tukolsky. It is such an accessible and interesting book that includes writing exercises for your students. I highly recommend it. Another book that you should get your hands on, especially if you are a writing or English professor, is Academic Writing Now by David Starkey. It includes wonderful, popular essays, nonfiction essays that you can use in your classroom, and they cover a wide range of genres. I cannot wait to use them in my courses. And another book just in time for the Halloween season is Vampire Literature and Anthology, co-edited by Robin Warner and Elizabeth Lewis. I had both of them on the podcast, so listen to that episode because you're going to love all of the vampire literature we talk about. Use my exclusive promo code, go to broadviewpress.com and use the code Ivory Tower for 20% off your order. Yes, 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Del Mar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA plus people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
I mean, I think that's
absent,
like,
yeah.
you know, why flash fiction is popular, because people just want to get a little bite and quit. And there is something to be said for that structure, you know. I think it's not as easy as it sounds to write a really, really short piece like that, because you've got to still follow all the necessities of writing a story, but you have very little elbow room to do it. So I find them very challenging. I've written a couple, but I feel I'm more comfortable in the 3,000 to 5,000 word area, you know, just because I've got a little more room to play. And but I do think we're losing something in this country, and I you know, it's very disappointing, and I don't know. I mean, there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I will say though, like with the young generation, it's been really fruitful or rewarding to just teach them about going to, like, I took some to the Metropolitan Art Museum and they never had been there. And they're like, wow, going to a museum, you disconnect from your phone, and like actually seeing the work up close isn't the same as seeing it in a video format. And I said, exactly. It's why live theater is so powerful. It's why, like, so many of them never have gone to a public library in their town, Laurie. And teaching them about the beauty of the library and browsing, like, that to me is like the entryway. If you don't know what to read, walk in your library and it's a buffet of literature and the arts. And I think it's like those spaces where bookstores, again, I think it's important to do things, experience the arts in person. Like, yes, there's so much you can do with technology, right? Like, we can read your books as an ebook format, and that's great. Like, audiobooks have become so popular, and that's really wonderful. But it's still, there are still things to do out in public. Like, there are things to do and experience viscerally that technology just will not capture for you. And yeah.
Yeah, well, I had a very unusual background because my mother was very well traveled and she was an artist. And so I got hauled to every museum imaginable all over the place. And we went to the library once a week and I, got my little stack of books and read them. And then she bought me any book I wanted. So, and we traveled. So I got the sense that I can do this. And I think that's something that's very important. Like I was taken to Broadway plays and operas and things like that as a child. And so I knew I could go to New York City and visit the museums and visit the galleries, whatever. But a lot of people don't have that experience. And if they don't, I think they get intimidated or they just don't think about the possibilities that are out there. And this is really, again, a lot about how kids are raised and what they're encouraged to do. And and if you think you can go anywhere you want in the world, that's a very powerful feeling. And a lot of people don't have that. I mean, I've always laughed. A friend of mine is at the Grand Canyon right now, and I said, "Well, I've always been see America last," because I really, I grew up going to Europe and various places, and I think that broad approach really helps my writing now because I've been a lot of places, and I think that gives me a grip on other cultures and backgrounds and characters. But I think that's one of the things that's really missing. And as you say, the difference between being there yourself and experiencing something and being online and experiencing it virtually are completely different effects.
Yeah, and I've asked every semester now, I ask my students the first week, why are you here? And they actually take a while to process that question. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them haven't even been asked, why are they in college? And I think there's just so much pressure on going to college, but it's also like what you said, you're writing, it's not just for the literati. Like it's not for those who've gone to college. And I think like there has been such a barrier, and that's why I love always talking with you, Laury, because you have spanned so many genres in your writing. You really write for so many different audiences that
Mm-hmm.
you're not just writing for the professor.
No.
You're not writing for an academic press. And I think, you know, that's a whole other question about academic presses right now because I think they're faced with a lot of issues um, of how they're going to continue publishing. But what's been beautiful is hearing, like, what do you love about hearing from your audiences or like realizing who your readers are?
Well, the two books that I've just had published in April and May, Fairhaven and the collection Contrary, I'm getting remarks from friends, but also reviewers. And it's fascinating because when I'm writing them, I don't always think of these angles because I'm sort of down in the trough here. And it's fascinating to find out what others see in the stories or in the novel. And um, one of the things that I found particularly fascinating, Jerry Wheeler just from Out in Print just did a review this morning for Contrary, and um, it was really interesting because he's a reviewer I really respect, and he's done a couple of my other books before. But I think he is one of those people that gets it, what you're trying to do, and he applauds it. But getting his feedback on something, or looking at a couple of lines that he wrote are very, it's very perceptively interesting, because I might not have thought of that. I might not have described the book that way or the story like that. So I think it's very interesting. I don't tend to use a lot of beta readers. Occasionally I have a new gal who's a really good editor, brilliant, in fact. The last year I've used her once or twice, but um, so I don't get a lot of feedback at the earlier stages of a book, which I'm sorry about because I think it's very valuable. But I really find it fascinating to find out what people think because often they show me something I didn't know about my work at all.
Well, that's exciting. It must be so just a pleasure to hear from your readers, but also see things that you don't see in your own writing.
Hmm.
And, that's why it is an interpretation. Like every different person who reads your work sees something different because we each bring in our own
Hmm.
subjective background or
That's right.
have our own catalog of literature that we read or consume.
And not every story or novel is going to hit a reader intimately. But one hopes, particularly in a collection like this, that there are stories that resonate with your own experience or the experience of somebody that's close to you. So, like the dementia stories, I think, many people have an experience with an elderly parent or grandparent in this field. And I think that that's going to be interesting to people and or people that have children. There are a lot of stories about that. So I think there's a lot in this collection that really will interest various people because they have had a similar experience or they know someone who has. And that I think is one of the nice things about writing a collection. Not every story is going to hit home, but somewhere in there you're going to find a couple that do. And whereas a novel, it's sort of like, well, either yes or no, it either hits home or it doesn't. But a collection really gives you a chance to explore and try out different characters and different circumstances.
Yes. And I think what's so exciting about what you do as a writer is like the short story collection. Someone is really hit by a story. They could say to their, friends, family, "Oh, I just read such and such by Laury A. Egan. You need to I'm going to make sure I send it to you." And I think that maybe that's something that we don't talk about a lot is the word of mouth, right? Like word of mouth of what you're reading and consuming. Like, how many people say, "Oh, I just saw this movie. You need to see it." Well, there was a time where everyone was saying, "I just read this novel. You
Yeah.
need to read it." Or "I read this story. You need to read it." And where has that happened in our culture?
I completely agree with you. I don't hear that a lot anymore. I used to all the time, but when I worked at Princeton University Press, I was surrounded by people that had really strong academic backgrounds, and they were literary people mostly, even as editors and whatnot. So that was sort of a natural kind of environment for me to hear about books. And our literature editor, who was a real character, if I've read about somebody like Elizabeth Bowen, for example, I would go into Jerry Sherwood the next morning and say, "Do you have any books or do you know anything about Elizabeth Bowen?" The next morning on my desk would be 3 or 4 books by Elizabeth Bowen. She had everything. I mean, she knew everybody and she knew a lot. She knew Bowen. I mean, she knew everybody. But that experience is very much within the academic purview. And I think the general public doesn't do this very much. And it's a shame because that's how we sell books too, is word of mouth. But, I don't think people are talking as much about books as they are films, for example, as you say. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited because a lot of listeners, as this is released during Pride Month, have been watching my social media and I did little mini interviews during the Rainbow Book Fair, the largest
Hmm.
LGBT literary festival. So they'll know about your work because of, your podcast coming out or recording right now. And it's exciting that there's so many amazing LGBT authors or just genres that they're writing in that it's important to know I love this genre. I'm going to look at this reader, like this writer who I didn't know about before hearing this. And I think social media can really curate a list of what to read if that's how you're using it. Again, I think it's why are you using this application? And you could definitely just scroll on social media and be mindless, or you can use it for curating a list of what to read, what to watch, like, as becoming part of a community. And I think that's what excites me about the growth of book clubs. I do feel like book clubs are now starting to become much more in everyone's consciousness, or at least people have reached out to me and they're like, "Oh, I want to join your book club. Like, I want to read, like, this book sounds interesting." And I think going back to those community groups is important, because I do think as you get older and you're not assigned reading, to have like an accountability circle, like, oh, that's right, everyone else is reading this, I need to read this. Like, that's why, I want those out there they know about your work, get a copy of Contrary, start a book club. I'm recommending this to those in my community who like short stories, or maybe don't really know about short stories, because it is a great opening of, like you said, you might not like that story, but you're going to be blown away by this other story. And that's the beauty of a short story collection.
Yeah, and particularly this one, because it is, the stories are diverse, and, you've got every sort of person represented, different age groups, sexes, and whatnot. And I think one thing that, again, I think I'm a little different is that I don't tend to always write for the same group of people. And, which is, one of the things that annoys me a little bit about the LGBTQ publishers is that they funnel everything in, and they, again, like everybody else, they want rom-coms and, maybe some sci-fi or whatever. And they don't want to do literary work very much, which is one reason I really love Andrew May, because he's willing to go along with me and support, books that maybe wouldn't sell a lot, or wouldn't sell as much as, let's say, a sci-fi book or whatever. So I think, I think the LGBTQ community could do a whole lot better on publishing really good work. There are a few really good writers in that community, but by and large, most of them that are being published by the smaller presses, which there are many of, just are not challenging anybody. It's all just, pretty obvious stuff. And I'm very disappointed in that. I mean, you take somebody like Virginia Woolf, who was sort of, I guess, I don't know, bisexual, whatever. I'm not exactly sure. I don't think she knew, maybe.
No, I don't think she did.
But, I think she wrote what she wanted to write. And, she might have, if living today, she might have written a lot of different kinds of books than she did when she lived, because it would be permissible to go into the gay area, and gay characters, which it wasn't really then. You could sort of imply them, but you couldn't really say much. So I really think that the gay community needs to publish a wider range and a more literary range of books, and challenging books, and books that could be read either by that community or the mainstream marketplace, because that's what I write for, is both. I don't write for one or the other. If anything, I'm probably leaning a little more towards the mainstream. And contrary, you've got some gay stories in here, but you've got a lot that aren't. And I think that that's important. Or the play at the end is about a disabled lesbian who is a photographer for, travel magazines, and she's hurt in a plane crash. And her therapist comes to the house to help her through this time, because she's really afraid of maybe being permanently disabled and what that's going to mean. So here we have a straight character and a gay character, but the gay issue isn't important in this story. It's just sort of, well, here it is. And I think that's the way we need to treat a lot of these, is that if it's a gay person or straight person or whatever, or trans, whatever, let's just deal with a character, and what's happening to that character. And I'd like to see more of that. Yeah.
A compelling character. No,
Yes.
I agree. So, Laury, this was such a wonderful conversation. I so appreciate anytime I get to talk with you, pick your literary brain. It's like, we're going through our old school library catalog of just opening the drawers and trying to find everything. So, how can everyone out there find your work, follow you on social media?
I'm on well, the books are available as ebooks, Kindle Unlimited, and paperback on Amazon, and they can be ordered through bookstores. My website is my name, Laury, Laury, Egan, Egan, at oh God, anyway, .com. And
Yeah.
I'm all over social media, Facebook and Twitter and Blue Sky now, and LinkedIn, everything like that. So, and my website contains a lot about my 15 novels and 2 collections and the 4 volumes of poetry. So I've been a busy kid.
Yes, you have. So, LaurieAEgan.com. Go get your hands on Laurie's books. You're going to love it. Please reach out to me. Reach out to Laurie, right? If you're reading, I know she would love to know what you're reading by her. And great beach reads, too, right? Beach reads don't have to just be quick page turners. Beach reads, you can have your pencil, you could absorb and have moments of reflection. So thank you so much, Laurie. This was wonderful. And I always love chatting with you.
Yeah, ditto. I always have fun with you, Andrew. You're so smart, and
Oh,
you bring a really an interesting angle to the podcast media, which I'm sure is very much appreciated by people that listen to you.
oh, thank you, Laurie. I appreciate that. Okay, well, bye everyone out there. Enjoy the summer.